Right. So the final thing that I thought we'd talk about is probably the most timely and most sensitive. Which is you recently announced that you've left the Reform Party, or at least stopped subscribing to the Reform Party. I'm not even sure how the membership works, actually.
Yeah.
If we can, so you put out this very measured and reasonable statement, and I think it was about 12 minutes long, the video. So
yeah,
and it's a very calm, reasonable explanation of what you felt had gone wrong with not just the party, but more the direction of travel, the direction towards the center of politics, moving towards the left of politics, and why this you didn't think actually satisfied the desires of the electorate. And I'm of the opinion that basically it's a mistake for the Reform Party to try and move into an already very crowded sort of centre-left field. And you got quite an inappropriate backlash to this, I think, from Nigel Farage himself, who... I'm going to read a few quotes because I just wanted your comment on this, because I and again, just to be clear, I didn't feel that this was a fair characterization of you at all. So GB News tell us that he described your departure from UK as a champagne moment and the absolute icing on the cake. In an interview in GB News, he claimed that you had become increasingly critical, stating that you'd attacked him more in public than the Labour Party have, and that you're very bitter, very twisted, and it's very sad. And the fact that you walked away is frankly a huge relief.
No doubt it is a huge relief, otherwise he wouldn't have said
Well, yeah.
And I think he also sang "The Sun Has Got His Hat On, Hip, 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 Hooray."
He did.
But I am not aware of having attacked Nigel at all, personally.
Well, neither am I. I've watched many of your interviews, many of your...
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is a much better line for Reform UK to be taking on many policies, for example, calling Brexit out for not having been done, as opposed to accepting it's been done, but it's been done badly. You know, you end up in a really difficult conundrum without, or, you know, leave that aside. But, you know, I don't accept Brexit's been done. I can't at any level accept it because Northern Ireland has been left behind. I think that we must have mass deportation because anyone who's in this country illegally should be detained and deported. And if you can't do it quickly, then you take whatever time it requires to get it done, but you get it done.
Just as a quick side there, wasn't that in their manifesto that they were going to remove illegal aliens?
It is, but there isn't a declaration to remove all illegal aliens.
Right, okay.
And I'm very worried about the rate of demographic change in the country because that is the other side of the same coin, which is doing so much damage to the culture and integrity. I say integrity of our society. That's actually grammatically incorrect because society requires a settled culture. And what we haven't got a society in this country anymore. We don't have a society. We have lots of different communities all coexisting, and sometimes less harmoniously than at other times. And so we don't have a society, and I see the rate of demographic change as the part of the reason our society no longer exists, and why multiculturalism is so damaging is because of the rate at which people have come into the country, amongst other things. And so I've got, you know, a few issues on that front with Reform UK. And also the party isn't democratised. There is no kind of check and balance or broad body of people that appoint the leadership and so on. It's a company owned by Nigel and Richard Tice. And Nigel has said, to be fair to him, that he's going to democratise, but it hasn't happened. And some of the statements coming out have been misleading, in my view, about what they're going to do. But can I just leave all of that aside for a second?
Yeah.
I think what Reform UK is squandering, if I may say so, is the ability to really galvanise and broaden and galvanise the movement it started. That frankly Richard and I started. Richard started and I joined him in this endeavour. 4.1 million people voted for Reform UK. And they voted for Reform UK because they want a 180-degree change in direction for how the country is governed. We've talked about it at length in this interview. And by moving towards, I think, a position where Reform UK thinks it can appeal more to the mainstream, what it's forgetting is that the mainstream is very crowded area politically. You've got Liberal Democrats, Labour, Conservatives. They're all there.
Well, Greens, SNP.
Greens,
like there are
yeah,
plurality of left.
And I mean, I suppose Reform wouldn't be as far over as they are, but I think in the pursuit of sanitising itself, in the pursuit, I think, frankly, of recruiting Tories, Reform UK is at risk of turning its back on the movement it created, and at risk of not growing that movement, the movement being turned off by it. And it's opening up a very wide gap, because Kemi Badenoch is not going to be able to take the Conservative Party, I don't like the expression, but she's not going to be able to take the Conservative Party to the right, yes, because she's got too many one nation wet Tories in it.
Apparently she's very close to Michael Gove.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I mean, some people say she's not, but anyway, she's going to have a devil's job moving the Tory party to the right. Nigel, it looks to me like Reform is heading towards the centre to garner support from the Tories and to recruit Tories. That means that for those of us who are really pro-British, who really want an agenda that changes the way the country's governed, that there's a huge political gap being opened up.
There is. I didn't get the data up on this one. I think it was on the previous one. But I was looking at the numbers the other day on the 2024 election, and out of 48 million potential voters, only 28 million voted. And I personally characterise our politics as quite far to the left and rather anti-British. And I suspect, although I don't have hard data to prove this, that a vast amount of the disillusionment with British politics is that, frankly, patriotic nativist people don't feel represented by any of these parties. And so when Nigel Farage, he does well in interviews when he's being interviewed from the left, but as soon as he's interviewed from the right, you get quite a bit, like the Stephen Edgington interview recently, and there were a couple of others where he essentially just sounded like a conservative politician. Oh no, we're not going to do anything about mass immigration. We're not going to do anything about Islam. I mean, what's he going to do about the quangocracy that's currently keeping this nation ensnared? Like, all of this he's been incredibly weak on, and I just don't understand why. And then as soon as anyone brings this up, he essentially ejects them from the grace of his party and soldiers on without them, creating a large number of people who are very valuable allies whom he is not taking into consideration whatsoever. Why is he like this?
Well, I think it's deliberate. I mean, the only way I can explain it is that I think he wishes to recruit Tories. He wishes to take the Tory party over. I mean, he put out a letter. Look, I don't want to have a go at Nigel.
No,
I don't want this to be the having a go at Nigel interview. But
I didn't want to turn it.
No, sure. But I just get it out there. There's people watching. But he sent a letter, as a matter of fact, to 1,300 odd Tory councillors who are coming up for election in May, saying, please consider joining Reform because you're going to lose as a member of the Conservative Party. And I can see some rationale for it because he wants to develop a ground game for Reform UK. But if you take on Tories on a wholesale basis, you become the Tory party. And in the pursuit of recruiting them, he's giving up on the very policies, principles, philosophy that got Reform its 4.1 million votes, that gave people some hope that this country may now have a change in direction. And so, I mean, I think we need to just look at what is opening up and how our movement, to which I feel very obliged because I was in part, helped create it, how our movement reacts to what Reform is doing. And, maybe we need a new political force to engage with that movement and represent that movement.
I am definitely coming to the conclusion that there needs to be some kind of big tent party that understands itself to be consciously and foremost pro-British, because I'm prepared to say things about Nigel that you're not prepared to say. I've spoken to many people over the years who have had this kind of problem with Nigel. He seems to feel that his ego is under threat, and his position as the kind of leader of the right in Britain is constantly under threat by talented people, and so he stepped on many people to get to where he is today. But this, I don't think, is sufficient. The fact that Reform are trailing in the polls when both the Labour and the Conservative parties are at their nadirs. I don't know how they could become less popular than they are, and yet Farage is still not beating any of them, is remarkable. And the fact that, I mean, when we had the local council elections a few weeks ago, and Reform I think got something like 4 out of however many hundred it was, and the Conservatives picked up loads, and it was like, well, hang on a second, how is this happening, Nigel? And he had to ask councillors to defect to him, and none did, or one did, I think. And it was like, okay, but that's a tremendous embarrassment. That shows a profound amount of weakness, and the fact that you are stood in an ivory tower saying, okay, you can come to me now, and it's like, well, why would they? Like, they've already committed, and you're letting the moment pass you by because of your inability to build a coalition of people who want to work with you. And now you're, Richard Tice disavowing the Unite the Kingdom rallies and any other commentator, Gwen Towler, and it's like, there's no level of loyalty there. There's no level of incorporation there. And
I didn't understand the Gwen Towler sacking. I don't. Gwen's been such a loyal servant,
and he still is,
of the movement.
Yeah, but the point being, there's a vast wealth of talent and energy that's being gate kept out of Reform, and like you say, they're going towards former Conservatives who lost.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't understand it. And I mean, look, it's nothing personal. I'm certainly not bitter and twisted, by the way.
I didn't think that for a second. I don't think any thought that.
I mean, just one thing about me for viewers is I'm a businessman who's run my own business most of my life, a small business. When you're a small businessman, you have no time for bitter and twisted experiences because...
Believe me, I know.
You know what it's like.
Yeah, I do.
You have to be looking, how do I keep going? How do I keep going? What's the next step? How do I protect myself? How do I promote myself? How do I make this thing work? How does my business going to succeed? That's all I'm interested in. I'm only in politics. This is going to sound quiche, but it's true. I'm only in politics because I feel the country is facing an existential threat at multiple levels. Yeah. And I am only interested in finding solutions to save the United Kingdom. That is it.
I completely agree. And this is why I do what I do. This is why I don't have a giant ego that runs away with me. I'm actually not a very... I'm not a person who's very interested in being on the news, right? I actually hate it whenever I've got a Google alert set to my name, so I know when they've published something about me. And every time it comes out, like the other day, Jess Phillips was attacking me. I was like, why? What have I done? I haven't done anything in like 5 years. What's going on?
I'd wear that as a badge of honor if Jess Phillips.
Well, yeah, sure, but it's just it's not what I want, And okay, if you're the sort of person who wants that, then fair enough. But like, you could have a well structured, well organized hierarchy that Nigel would be at the top of, and then they would have layers of activists and and close advisors and things like that. But instead, he surrounds himself with just a handful of people who all seem okay, but not brilliant, but also there's a kind of fragility to the Reform Party that I think, well, as soon as Nigel, frankly, I don't think he's going to win the next election on the current trajectory that he's on in the big numbers that he's expecting to do. That honestly, I thought 6 months ago that he would be capable of. I think the fragility that exists in the Reform Party means that essentially he'll get 30 seats or something. But then Nigel's going to be 65 and say, okay, I'm just going to pack it in.
Well, that's the risk with him owning and controlling the party.
And then the whole thing just collapses.
There's one point of weakness.
Exactly.
If that point of weakness breaks, the whole thing's gone.
And it's not like Nigel hasn't done this before with UKIP, with the Brexit Party. It's not that he doesn't have a history of this. And I'm not even bothered about Nigel. Okay, whatever, Nigel. I don't care. But I know lots of the activists on the lower levels that he relies upon. And I know that they're good people. Like, I've spoken to various functions where essentially it may as well have been a Reform function, even though officially it wasn't, because they're all like, well, no, we know that he's not great on this, but it's the only thing we've got going. And I feel that he's going to and this happened when I joined UKIP. A lot of people were genuinely disappointed with how Nigel treated them and not taken into consideration the amount of time that they gave up and effort that they gave up.
I mean, I'm deliberately not talking about this in a personal context because I actually don't mind being treated badly. That's fine. Yeah. Treat me as badly as you wish to treat me. Stay true to the cause. I mean, Nigel, if he stays true to the cause, can call me anything he wants to call me. I couldn't care less.
Yeah, Nigel, if you were doing the right thing, I'd be like, okay, well, that's weird, but whatever.
Absolutely, whatever. Absolutely, I couldn't care less. And I'm thick-skinned. That's fine. So, I mean, I just, let's just hope things get better with reform, or something emerges which garners that movement, grows the movement, and delivers the result for the British people, delivers the vote that we had in 2016 for us to be an independent, proud, sovereign, democratically governed state with strong borders. I mean, it's simple, right?
Yeah. Those people are still out there waiting for political representation. They still voted for it. And I just thought we'd just end on. You've written an article in the Express recently.
Yeah, this morning.
This morning that I thought again was like if it was addressed to anyone else essentially other than Nigel Farage, I would say, well, this is a fair critique and a reasonable critique that ought to be addressed. But you were saying that you think Nigel will see this as a personal attack.
Well, he described me as having attacked him personally, and so he does obviously see the criticism, and I have been making criticism.
Yeah.
I want the party democratized, and I want policies to change. But I think he does see criticism as personal attack, so I suspect he'll probably see the article as a personal attack. It isn't. Nigel, if you're watching, it's not a personal attack.
Again, one of the things that I think Nigel fails to understand is a lot of the people who he exiles from his orbit are fans of his. They're people who like him. I've been supporting Nigel Farage for years.
Yeah.
And I don't like to be like, okay, but, actually, how many Conservatives do you really need? Aren't you looking at those as the sort of like the people who failed the country? And, you should be raising up a bunch of people.
I mean, what Nigel should be doing, forget about everything we've discussed. What Nigel should be doing is gathering round him all the really great thinkers of our movement, including people like yourself, if I may say so, and others,
But there's such a wealth of talent.
There's such a wealth of talent. I won't name names because then I'll have to go on naming names until I've named everyone. But there's a massive wealth of talent, all desirous, all recognizing the threats the country's facing, all desirous to do well by the country and only in it for the country. And he should be gathering those people around him and promoting them and listening to them and understanding what it is that needs to be done and making a fighting force. We should be a fantastic, strong fighting force.
Very much in the way that Trump has done recently. You look at all of the people that Trump's been bringing into his campaign and into his administration, and you realise this is taking on the sort of Avengers-style mimetic quality to it. It's like, oh, hang on a second, there is a revolution happening here.
There is a revolution happening in the States.
And we could have the same thing here, but Nigel Farage is...
Well, maybe he'll do it. Maybe he'll watch this interview and go, yeah, I'm going to do that.
Maybe. I would. I'm not going to put my money on it, but the point is, I think that the potential is all there. And okay, if Nigel Farage isn't going to pick it up, well, he's not going to be around forever. Maybe someone comes along afterwards and does it.
Yeah, well, I think there are many great and good people in this country who want it done, and then it just becomes a matter of bringing them together. How do you bring them together? That's the challenge, and then you do it.
You know what I've found is people are actually a lot more open to have discussions and form friendships in this sphere than not. Actually, I've not had any problems getting guests on here. I've not had any problems going to other people's shows. Everyone has been very, very lovely. Very few out of control egos. Actually, they seem to be accumulating in reform. But in every other way, everyone's been completely level-headed, completely polite, and concerned about the future of the country, primarily. Yeah. And so I'm actually mildly optimistic that if someone were to do something, then people would flock to the banner quite easily.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you could always go over to our website and watch Beau's 12-part series, at least so far, about Caesar's life and ancient Rome. And if you want to see all the other things that we're up to, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.